These movies certainly didn't fail because of these specific moments. Well, most of them didn't. But these scenes would have benefited from getting it done in post, rather than fastidiously committing to doing it during shooting. I am Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 10 times movies should have used CGI. Number 10. Orphan First Kill. The fact that Orphan prequel First Kill didn't release until 2022, some 13 years after the original cult horror flick, created a major logistical headache for the production. After all, the original film's twist was that 9-year-old Esther was actually a 33-year-old woman with a rare hormonal disorder which caused her to resemble a child. Isabel Fuhrman, who played the part, was herself around 11 years of age when the film was shot, and by the time the prequel got shooting, she was 23, quite legitimately an adult woman in her own right and in no way resembling a child posing as an adult. In a rather unconvincing attempt to get around this hurdle, the filmmakers simply used in-camera tricks to try and make Fuhrman pass as a younger, shorter person. These included forced perspective camera work, having her adult co-stars stand on platforms, having Fuhrman stand on her knees, and making her wear contact lenses to make her eyes appear larger and more childlike. Yet ultimately the effect is pretty laughable, because Fuhrman, bless her, just doesn't look like a kid anymore. The production would have benefited immensely from some digital de-aging instead, yet it's fair to assume that the obviously tight budget probably couldn't accommodate such chicanery. Now I've got a quick question for you, what do you think the best ever use of de-aging in a movie was? You let me know in the comment section right down below. Number 9. Casino. Martin Scorsese tends to make more effective use of CGI in his movies than almost any other filmmaker, typically deploying quote-unquote invisible CGI to extend sets and basically immerse the audience deeper in the world of the story he's telling. But you know what would have immersed us all deeper in the world of his 1995 mob classic Casino? Getting rid of that damn dirty mannequin at the start. The very first shot of the film shows protagonist Sam Ace Rothstein getting into his car just as a bomb blows it up, apparently killing him. That sequence was achieved in camera, with Scorsese simply cutting between a locked-off shot of De Niro getting into the car and another of the car blowing up with a mannequin inside. The problem is, the mannequin looks not even remotely like De Niro, nor any human being really, ensuring an otherwise thrilling opening is rendered laughable to all who notice the gaffe. Scorsese likely assumed that nobody would ever see the film in high enough resolution for it to be an issue, but alas, once Casino hit Blu-ray, it became glaringly obvious. Even back in 1995, it wouldn't have been terribly difficult to composite the car window from the previous take to have De Niro sat inside the car when it blows up. Hell, one fan got fed up enough of waiting for Scorsese to fix it that they just did it themselves. How impressive. Number 8. Dunkirk. Christopher Nolan tends to avoid using CGI in his movies unless absolutely necessary, preferring to achieve as much in-camera as humanly possible. And in the case of his war epic Dunkirk, he refused to use VFX to create larger crowds of soldiers on Dunkirk beach. Crowd duplication is an incredibly basic effect that's basically invisible when executed right, and yet Nolan preferred to expand the crowd size through practical means. That is, using cardboard cutouts placed at a distance to stand in for flesh and blood men. It's a laudable effort, yet one of the most common complaints about the film is how oddly empty the beach looks, given that hundreds of thousands of soldiers were ultimately evacuated from it. Nolan's fastidious commitment to doing things for real evidently stung him a bit here. It's still a terrific film, but using CGI to really emphasize the scale and chaos on the beach would have done it wonders. The mesmerizing Dunkirk evacuation scene from Joe Wright's Atonement, which is very obviously packed to the gills with digital refinements, feels so much bigger than the equivalent in Nolan's film. Regardless of which of the two is ultimately more accurate, Nolan's version feels oddly pared down, and dare one say, not that cinematic. Number 7. Jurassic Park 3. Jurassic Park 3 gets a lot of justified flack for its terrible script, awful characters, and horrendous anti-climax of an ending, but credit where credit's due. The CGI dinosaurs still look fantastic, and will likely age better than any of the digital dinos in the recent Jurassic World trilogy. But the threequel also includes extensive dinosaur animatronics, and while most of them look pretty solid throughout, the practical Spinosaurus just doesn't pass muster. During the opening plane crash sequence in particular, the Spinosaurus looks laughably fake, with its gormless, expressionless face and blatant lack of articulation compared to both the digital version and other animatronic dinos throughout the movie. Given the enormous effort that the late great Stan Winston and his team put into making the Spinosaurus prop, it was 44 feet long and weigh 13 tons. It would have surely been easier to just render this particular dinosaur entirely with CGI. In part, the problem might be that nobody photographs an animatronic dinosaur quite like Steven Spielberg. But all the same, the film's CGI dinos are spectacular enough that they should have done most of the heavy lifting here. Number 6. Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace. The only example on this list where the filmmaker was bothered enough and had sufficient creative power to go back and fix it is that god-awful Yoda puppet from The Phantom Menace. While George Lucas receives plenty of well-earned criticism for excessively relying on emergent digital filmmaking tech for the Star Wars prequels, the original theatrical release of The Phantom Menace indeed realized Yoda with a rather ropey-looking puppet. As charming as the original Yoda puppet was, the one created for the prequels looked rough, and further stuck out due to the incredibly digital world it was presented within. For the film's 2011 Blu-ray release, however, Lucas replaced the puppet with a digital double which looks so much better, and ensures Yoda's appearance is consistent across the prequel trilogy. For all of the many overzealous changes Lucas has made to Star Wars over the years, he was absolutely right to do it in this case. Oh yeah, and just a quick thanks for checking out this video today. If you like what you see, then go and tap on that subscribe button down below, baby. Number 5. In Time. Andrew Niccol's promising yet disappointing sci-fi film In Time boasts some solid world building for its modest $40 million budget, but this apparently didn't extend to a convincing model car prop. Midway through the movie, when protagonists Will and Sylvia are run off the road, we cut to an outrageously bad shot of a scale model car flying off said road and flipping down an embankment, before cutting back to a full-size car landing on its wheels. Everything about this is so wrong. The perspective fails to disguise the scale of what's very obviously a miniature car toy, the weight of the car flying through the air is completely off, which could have been remedied by shooting in slow motion, and the fact that neither Will nor Sylvia are ejected from the car is also rather ridiculous. Evidently, the production was a little overconfident in their ability to execute this shot practically, because while flipping cars digitally isn't totally easy to get right, a slightly blurry CGI car would have incited a lot less laughter than this daft Matchbox car stunt. Number 4. Mission Impossible: Fallout. The newer Mission Impossible movies are, for the most part, a Hollywood ideal, a kinetic fusion of jaw-dropping practical stunt work and cutting-edge VFX deployed where necessary. Yet as brilliant as 2018's sixth film Mission Impossible: Fallout might be, there's also one set piece where all the time, money and effort spent doing it practically ultimately feels quite redundant. For all of the movie's many spectacular, practically executed stunts, the mid-film sequence where Ethan Hunt performs a perilous halo jump out of a plane in the middle of a lightning storm basically undermines itself as a real stunt. In reality, Cruise performed the jump from 25,000 feet an apparent 106 times in order to get 3 usable takes. And as insanely committed as this undeniably is, the end result is so fake and digital looking that it basically feels for naught. This is because while Cruise did indeed jump for real, the scene has a ton of digital enhancements. The sky, lightning, and city below him were all created in post, for the most part ensuring that this looks indistinguishable from something created in a comfortable, controlled set. Cruise clearly relishes challenges like this, and fair play to him, but why work so hard if it's only going to be painted over with a ton of plastic-looking CGI anyway? Why not just do the whole thing in a warehouse with a green screen wind tunnel? Madness. Number 3. American Sniper. American Sniper is a pretty good movie that, no matter its box office success and shed-load of Oscar nominations, will always be best remembered for that damn fake baby. From the moment the movie hit cinemas, audiences couldn't stop commenting on the obvious fake baby which was held by Bradley Cooper in a scene opposite Sienna Miller. It was embarrassingly obvious that the baby was a rather naff-looking prop doll, and one which poor Cooper tried to subtly manipulate in order to give the impression of movement. The furore was vocal enough that screenwriter Jason Hall eventually explained what happened. On the day of shooting, the production hired 2 babies for the scene, the first of which had a fever, while the second was a no-show, prompting famously efficient Clint Eastwood to simply use a doll instead. Yet given the movie's $59 million budget and the relative brevity of the scene, it shouldn't have been out of the question to touch the scene up in post-production, giving the baby some realistic motions and making its face look less, well, plastic. Number 2. X-Men Apocalypse. X-Men Apocalypse is by far the most disappointing of all the X-Men movies, largely because it does almost nothing interesting with the arrival of its much anticipated villain, Apocalypse. Oscar Isaac isn't given all that much to do, and more to the point, his underwhelming stature and silly looking makeup and costume design just don't even remotely convince that we're looking at a god-tier mutant. The Thanos of the Fox X-Men movies, basically. Thanos is an apt counterpoint, in fact, because it's painfully clear that director Bryan Singer should have instead had Isaac perform the part through performance capture, just as Josh Brolin did for Thanos in the MCU. Given that X-Men Apocalypse rocked a $178 million budget, it certainly had the coffers to make it happen, and in turn would have been able to realize the supervillain as the genuinely larger-than-life character he's supposed to be. Instead, and no offense to Isaac here, he just ended up looking like a fairly committed cosplayer. Number 1. Kingsman: The Secret Service. Kingsman: The Secret Service's most memorable scene is unquestionably the ultra-violent church massacre, where villain Richmond Valentine activates a phone signal which causes everyone inside, that is Harry Hart and a bunch of right-wing tossbags, to start brutally murdering one another. The gloriously over-the-top sequence set to Freebird certainly uses its fair share of CGI, from digitally stitching shots together to resemble a smooth single take, to oodles of digital blood, and more cartoonish moments like Harry setting a man's head on fire. There is one moment of practical in-camera mayhem that just doesn't work at all though, when Harry rams a man face first into a church pew, causing his body to basically fold up like an accordion. Ultimately, the very obvious rubber mannequin used for the sequence makes it more hilariously silly than bone-crunchingly brutal. And this is probably something that director Matthew Vaughn should have just tweaked a little digitally in post-production. You live, you learn though, eh?